A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Galatians. Brothers and sisters, when the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to ransom those under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons and daughters. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Years ago, when I became vocation director for the Redemptorist, it required that I drive to many places along the eastern seaboard. And I can remember early on, before we even had computers and things like MapQuest or even GPSs, how my secretary would painstakingly call and take down the directions dictated over by the phone by nuns and parish secretaries. I quickly discovered that giving directions is an expression of one's perspective. It is truly an art and not a science. Now ask anyone about distance and some will respond with time. So for instance, how far is it from Boston to New York City? To some, it's 4 hours. To others, it's 240 miles. Some people will say when you ask for directions, well, turn left on Route 95. And others will say, take 95 north. Distance is entirely a matter of perception. The first time I visited a parish school, I was told that the left turn would be about 3 miles from the sign. It was 8 miles. Visiting another school, I was told that the bend in the road would appear several miles down the road. It was less than a mile. One would think that left is left and right is right, but apparently that is not the case. Turn left at the mobile station can mean several things, I have learned, and often it does not mean what one would think. The person giving the directions is accustomed to approaching the station from one direction and forgets that I'm approaching it from another. Or people will say, it's where the Kmart used to be. And I say to myself, if only I had lived in this town 10 years ago, like those who used to shop at Kmart, where it used to be, I wouldn't be lost now. For a sweet little nun from Vermont, whose name I can't remember, directions were not a matter of time or distance. Believe it or not, they were a matter of prayer. She told me, it's 3 rosaries from Brattleboro to Windsor, and she meant it. Now, as for God giving directions, He has His ways, and hearing and following them requires a very special point of view. Take Abraham, for example, to whom God gave startling directions, but very bewildering, hazy instructions. He said to Abraham, go forth from the land of your kinsfolk and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. It's not the where that was important, but the going forth, which required a trust that God would show the way, even if his directions would be given on a need-to-know basis. Hundreds of years later, the author of Hebrews commented, by faith, Abraham obeyed what he was called, where he was called to go. He went out, not knowing where he was to go. We all need help navigating our way through life. And when we lose our bearing and worry about where to turn next, it's time for prayer, a time for that trust that God will show us the way. With God, it's not so much where I am to go, but toward whom. It's not so much how I get there, but with whom. I have found that Mary, our Mother of Perpetual Help, is the best GPS when it comes to my personal and spiritual direction, particularly when it comes to showing me the way to Jesus. She is God's perpetual signpost. I know that Jesus' promise to be with us always is not an empty promise, but there are so many times when I need Mary to lead me, show me, guide me into the presence of Jesus, who really desires to be with me. And I experience such freedom when I trust that her sure-footed steps will lead me to the one I seek. There's a song that we sing here at the Novena. She will show us the promised one. Years ago, when I was living in Washington, D.C. and working with Mother Teresa's sisters, every morning before they went out on mission, they would gather around the statue of Our Lady in the chapel, and they would sing a beautiful little song. It was called Our Lady of the Way, and it goes like this. No one can live as an island, journeying through life alone. Since we're most loved by a mother, Jesus gave us his own. Be with us, Mary, along the way. Guide every step we take. Lead us to Jesus, your loving Son. Come with us, Mary, come. Come with us, Mary, come. You know, I think that sweet little nun from Windsor, Vermont was correct. The best distance between 2 points is prayer. And I promise you, praying to Mary, whether it be 3 rosaries or a simple Ave, will lead us to the one whom we seek, Jesus, the promised one.